Hey guys, this is MES Tech. We're the hot mess of tech shows on the internet. I'm Mac.
I'm Stan, and we're going to be talking about some news, technology news. That's what we primarily do, but we're working on some other different videos. So what do we want to talk about today?
We got a couple of things on the docket. The new boards from ASUS that are coming out that have been leaked. We're also talking about some ray tracing stuff, as well as cloud gaming?
Yeah, we're going to talk about
funky.
Cloud gaming. Let's just go with the AMD leaks. We've seen actually some of the boards that have been leaked from ASUS, the X570 platform, which is actually going to get an upgrade in terms of their motherboards. So previously, the highest level that you could really get was like a Hero or something along those lines, but now they're coming out with a Crosshair VIII Formula. So this is going to be the top shelf, and it's the first time we've really seen that since like the 990 FX platform for the AM3 Plus socket.
So we're also stepping up to the 7nm process, which is going to be firmware updated to their legacy boards as well, so that's awesome. And some PCI Express 4 stuff.
Yeah, no, PCI Express 4 is going to be a standard feature on these X570 boards because that controller is built right into it and the hardware is going to be set up. As far as the BIOS, we do know that some of the hardware is capable of PCI Express 4.0. However, a manufacturer would have to build capabilities into their BIOS. And while we've started to see some of those BIOSes roll out and they're not necessarily supporting PCI Express 4.0, they do have inside their little code lines codename Valhalla, which we're assuming is going to be that 7nm Ryzen chip that is due out in the middle of 2019.
Which sounds super cool.
It's just like, yeah, let's go to Valhalla, the land of the gods that have fought their great battles.
And it's super cool. The top of the line of these boards, the Formula, it comes with built-in Wi-Fi.
Yep.
Looks like stuff from N to AC stuff.
And, yeah, N to AC, so like the most recent, basically backward compatibility to any Wi-Fi that you really need, as well as capabilities for the newest versions as well.
You got it, and tons of USB 2, 3, whatever.
Hopefully what we're going to be getting out of the new X570 chipset, which we got similar upgrades in 470, is like Precision Boost 3.0, which is going to give you better control over actual automated overclocking from AMD, possibly XFR 3. We don't know about those features because these are just leaks yet, and we don't see those controls, but hopefully they're going to be a feature that can help maximize even more performance out of this generation and previous generation Ryzen CPUs.
Yeah, I actually really like that even on my Intel platform. Just it was a really handy tool to click, go, I want just a little bit more.
It just makes it so much easier. We don't necessarily know about power phases on these, but there is like 12 boards that are currently in ASUS's X570 lineup. So that's ranging from the Toughs and the Primes, like the X570 Prime, to the Strix gaming line, and then back up into the ROG stuff.
Cool. Shadow of the Tomb Raider has finally gotten all of its RTX stuff implemented, so we'll see that. We were checking out some pictures today.
Couldn't really see a whole heck of a lot of difference, but those were at much smaller resolutions versus, say, like 4K gaming. We did notice that there was a few changes in terms of performance. I mean, if you're running on RTX Ultra Shadows, and this is not real-time ray traced lights, it's just real-time ray traced shadows with DLSS, you're starting to see a hit of like from off to RTX Ultra on of like half.
Which
like
is
you get
crazy.
half the frames, 128 to like 68.
So it's definitely, 60 is perfect, if you're okay with that at 4K with all this fancy new stuff going on, but 120 is very crisp.
120 is very crisp. And with this, we actually saw a few more benchmarks that are coming out of RTX stuff because ray tracing is actually going to be enabled on Pascal and Volta GPUs.
Woo-hoo!
So that's going to be your GTX 1060, 1070, 1080, 1080 Ti, the stuff that we're running in our PCs, as well as your Titan Vs and other platforms like that. Yeah, so based on information that Nvidia released at GDC 2019, you're talking about a 3-time performance bump, GTX 1080 versus RTX 2080, when you're talking about Metro Exodus at high resolutions running RTX and DLSS.
Which totally makes sense. They're kind of cheating. There's extra cores in there and stuff like that.
It was designed for the programs. You know, it's running Pascal and versus running Turing is going to be a night and day difference just due to the capabilities built into the actual silicon itself. So it's going to be cool to see what you can do with ray tracing, and if you have like a GTX 1080 Ti, it's possible that at say like 1080p you can start utilizing RTX. You wouldn't necessarily get like DLSS and some other stuff like that, but if you can get RTX and you can run at 60 frames per second on something like Battlefield 5, Metro Exodus, Shadow of the Tomb Raider, or other programs when they actually release them, That is going to be a really cool thing, and it gives that legacy hardware just a little bit more room to breathe.
It does, and they're still working on refining stuff, making it more optimized, so we may even see more FPS increase with the older legacy cards, or maybe even a reasonably priced 20 series card.
Yeah, so while we're talking about Nvidia actually going through and making it easy for people with older cards to utilize RTX, or at least as a comparison, we actually saw another release at GDC, which is going to implement and optimize RTX technology for productivity suites. So utilizing the Turing cores and the extra architecture to actually increase productivity in like Cinema 4D, Blender, Premiere, all those kind of things, Lightroom. They're going to give you access to this kind of neural networking pathway that is utilized through the GPU, which is going to help with some Lightroom stuff in Photoshop, especially in rendering these brand new images. Good on them for making an RTX card, well, useful.
They're like, let's take this fun thing for gaming and making everything pretty, and well, now you have to bring it to work. But that's still okay. Nvidia also released a nice little publicity stunt boost, whatever you want to call it, saying that they how did they word it?
Okay, so they say that the RTX series cards made 45% more in revenue compared to the GTX Pascal lineup. So this is from the point in time where they started selling the RTX cards until now.
Which is at first it was like, go them, and then you thought twice about it and realized, wait a minute, they started off, the 1080 Ti's started off at
$699, $700,
and the 2080 Ti's are $1,300.
So they're $1,199 for the Founders Edition cards, which immediately sold out. So if you're talking about Founders Edition versus Founder Edition, it's almost a, I don't know, doubling of the price, which could account for why you have 45% more revenue than what you had expected. And depending on the actual units sold, this could be viewed as almost disingenuous, because if they sold a higher volume of 2080s and 2080 Ti's compared to what they had available at launch for 1080s, and the 1080 and the 1080 Ti, the Ti wasn't even available. You could just buy a GTX 1080. They hadn't even come out with a 1080 Ti yet. So whether these numbers are valid, it's great for the adoption of RTX, at least in terms of publicity, but I don't necessarily know if it actually represents.
It doesn't mean anything. We can walk away from this. It doesn't mean anything.
That is very true.
Don't get excited. It doesn't mean anything yet.
But should we get excited about streaming games online?
Yeah, see, we're both on the same page of we like our gaming PCs and stuff like that, but we also like the idea of being able to pick up a remote no matter where we are, sit down and game, or hop between a video and almost instantly pick up a video game at an okay frame rate, at an okay resolution, because just for the experience, that's why we video game.
So why are we talking about this?
We are talking about this because
Google's most recent announcement at GDC, which is basically an online game streaming service that they say is going to be capable of 4K resolutions at 60 frames per second over a 30 meg per second internet connection.
And that's with no box, no intermediate between the computer, the remote, or the TV, the remote, and which has got us a little bit curious as to how they're going to interface that. Just the internet side of things is totally fine. Is it going to be an app on a smart TV? Is it going to be something you can Bluetooth in with a little dongle that you plug into your TV?
Maybe like a Chromecast kind of thing.
Right. We don't quite know yet. But at the same time, if this is really going to be a thing, it'll completely get rid of the Xbox, PlayStation, console, whatever, clean up if you're one of those guys that OCD and can't handle any cords or wires anywhere, this guy. But it'll be really cool, and it's almost unlimited as far as game selection. So.
Well, yeah, that's the big thing, because while they've done their streaming service through like their Google Stream, where they had people playing Assassin's Creed Odyssey via online only, so it's just like you'd log into their browser-based server and then you'd be able to play the game real time, and that's where they got a lot of the data. So this whole platform is based on the idea that you could be like on YouTube, and if you wanted to, because of this sponsored little video link or the sponsored little link that's going to be on the corner, you could just be like, oh, I want to play, boom, and then you would pick up your remote control, which looks oddly like a cross between an Xbox 360 and a PlayStation remote. You'd basically pick this thing up, and then throughout its interface, which we're not sure, the most practical seems like it would be some sort of network-based Wi-Fi receiver, or it actually Wi-Fi connect directly to it itself to remove as much latency as possible, so that way you'd actually get good communication between the game servers and yourself. But you'd be able to basically just hop on this game system, and it's not even a system, but just hop on the game and start playing.
Yeah, it's kind of a crazy concept. And realistically, it's not just Google that's been doing this. Nvidia has been trying to do the same thing with Nvidia Grid. It's now being implemented as kind of a workstation process where they have giant GPUs helping to boost anything for mobile, basically, for tablets, smartphones, work on the go. Steam has been doing the same kind of stuff.
Well, they started to sell their Steam box and their Steam controllers, and then they actually have a DIY Steam setup that you could do as long as you had the minimum specifications. And that would allow you to kind of just utilize Steam as a background OS. You can actually see the Steam OS page is still up. So if you wanted to run a Linux box dedicated for gaming, you could actually get by with lower specifications to get a little bit higher performance because it's like dedicated for that purpose. And it's very similar to what they were trying to do. And then that was kind of cross-platform. It didn't really matter what you were playing because you were always playing through the Steam OS portal. But with this, it's going to be intriguing because they actually have to have dedicated servers that are based around this. And they released a few specifications. So they're thinking like custom x86 based Intel CPUs because AMD denied supplying the CPUs for this. And then custom Radeon graphics cards with 16 gigs of memory for the system or dedicated for the processes, and it's going to be HBM2, which is going to be capable of like 10.7 teraflops as far as compute, which is pretty much in line with like a Vega 56.
It sounds like it'll be a pretty solid gaming option for just about anybody. I have no idea what this thing's going to cost or if it's going to be a pay-per-go service, pay-per-month service.
It's most likely a subscription.
Yeah.
And when you're talking about subscriptions like this, especially if you have access to unlimited games, then
they're probably going to be pricey.
Yeah. Or if you have to like get a base subscription of like $10 a month and then you buy the game that you want to stream and then you have like your own dedicated server space or something along those lines, the biggest hurdle that you're going to run into is that what you're going to get out of game quality is dependent on how much hardware you have access to. So say that you're gaming and you only have one CPU and GPU that you can utilize, but if you're gaming at a lower peak time and now you have 2 CPUs or 3 GPUs or something along those lines, you're going to get better graphics, better rendering, better lighting, you're going to get better anti-aliasing. If you have access to more hardware, you get more stuff.
Which is an odd concept.
Yeah.
But I'm sure they'll work it out.
Well, it's just like Netflix, man. Like, if you're on Netflix at a certain point in time, say, like, everybody in your neighborhood just got out of school and they want to check out the latest show, then your streaming quality is going to suck most of the time. Mm-hmm. But if you're watching it at, like, 3 o'clock in the morning, then you're fine because there's not anybody else that's going to be on that service. So you get to utilize more of the hardware. You can think about it in a very similar way to that, but the amount of scaling and the amount of actual physical investment in hardware that they're going to have to do is pretty insane.
It's millions of dollars, for sure.
Started with a B.
Started with a B.
Millions and then billions.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to think about it. I'm happy they're using Intel, though. Maybe it'll keep them in business longer. I mean...
Well, they'll be fine. They'll be fine. Chipzilla is going to be fine.
Chipzilla.
But you have to wonder how it's going to impact people that are developing games for this kind of platform. Because if they're developing games for a streaming service, it's a very different revenue model that they're going... Because they're going to have to take a portion of that, and Google is most likely going to have some sort of chunk to maintain the hardware in order to make it viable for them. So if we're comparing it to something like the Epic Game Store or Steam, where publishers get a percentage of each unit sold, and they're not required to have any kind of control over the hardware... It's how are you going to transition to that model? And if you really want to take advantage of multiple GPUs and CPUs, you're going to have to program for that shit.
Yeah,
that means
going to completely change the way that the architecture in the game actually it works with your hardware or the hardware they're using, not the stuff you just have a remote.
Yeah. So what you're going to see is most likely a resurgence in multi-GPU based programming inside video games, which is kind of weird because SLI and the various other ways of implementing multiple GPUs have kind of fallen off over the most recent years. You don't see as much performance enhancement from running 2, 3, 4 GPUs in, a single machine, where you used to see a lot of benefit.
That's true, and it's all again. It all comes down to how manufacturers and game developers has programmed their games to interact with the hardware. So as that changes, maybe we'll see them come back.
One thing's for sure: if we're talking about music, streaming became the way to do it. TV, streaming became the way to do it. Movies, streaming's the way to do it. So games, you're just the next one to fall in the dominoes that are leading us towards total dependency on streaming services.
Seriously, man?
So on that bombshell, we're going to kind of wrap this one up. That's pretty much everything that we have to talk about. So if you guys like what you see, hit the like button. Don't forget to comment down below if you want something to be talked about specifically, if there's something you saw in news or anything you want to see us feature or do. Let us know so that way we can take those comments and turn them into reality for you. But as always, I'm Stan.
I'm Mac.
And this is MES Tech.
The hot mess of tech shows on the internet.
We will see you next time.
Yes, see you. Hi, this is MES Tech.
That's a really terrible intro.